First Contact and Assessment. High Admiral Genvar of the Meridian Empire stood motionless before the Great Council's circular chamber, her crystalline exoskeleton reflecting the pale blue light from above. The massive holographic display behind her showed a seemingly unremarkable planet, the third world of an ordinary yellow star. "Esteemed council members," she began, her translator converting her harmonic speech into the standard imperial frequency. "What you're seeing is designation Sol 3, a world that has captured our attention for rather unusual reasons." The council members, representatives of the Empire's founding species, shifted in their gravity chairs. Most appeared already bored, having witnessed countless first contact briefings over their centuries-long lives. "Another primitive world seeking absorption into our benevolent empire?" asked Council Elder Mrath, his tentacles waving dismissively. "Surely this doesn't require full council attention." Genvar activated a series of archived recordings. The holographic display shifted to show various scenes from Earth's history: nuclear tests, space launches, military exercises, and most importantly, massive underground complexes being constructed across every continent. "This species, who call themselves humans, have followed no known developmental pattern," she continued. "While most civilizations progress through predictable stages of advancement, these humans have demonstrated what our analysts call evolutionary leaps. They went from primitive atmospheric flight to landing on their moon in less than 7 decades." "Impressive, but hardly threatening," interrupted another council member. "We've seen rapid advancement before." Genvar's crystalline form pulsed with subtle colors, a sign of concern in her species. "What's unprecedented is their paranoia, their preparation. Before ever encountering alien life, they've been preparing for interstellar war for over a century. Their entertainment, their literature, their military doctrine, all of it assumes hostile first contact." She displayed more images: orbital defense platforms disguised as communications satellites, weapons testing facilities hidden in mountain ranges, and enormous underground cities that could shelter millions. They haven't even achieved faster-than-light travel, yet they've developed pulse weapons that could theoretically disable our shield systems. They've created armor using principles our scientists considered theoretical. Every major population center on their planet can be completely sealed and sustained underground within hours. The council chamber grew quiet as the implications sank in. Elder Mrath's tentacles ceased their dismissive wavering. "You're suggesting these humans anticipated our eventual arrival?" "Not specifically ours, honored Elder. They've prepared for any possible threat from the stars. Their information networks are filled with thousands of scenarios about first contact, most ending in conflict. They've been psychologically preparing their population for interstellar war for generations." A younger council member leaned forward. "Surely you're not suggesting we avoid contact? They're still pre-FTL. Standard absorption protocols. Would be a catastrophic mistake." Genvar interrupted, her crystalline form flashing red. A serious breach of protocol that demonstrated her conviction. "Our standard approach assumes we're dealing with a species that either welcomes us as advanced benefactors or lacks the means to resist effectively. These humans, they've been expecting us. Perhaps not us specifically, but something like us. And they've been getting ready." She displayed one final image: a massive underground facility deep beneath a mountain range. "This is just one of hundreds of similar installations we've detected. Our deep scans show technology we can't even properly analyze. They're hiding something, council members. These humans have cards they haven't shown, weapons they've never tested where we could see them." Elder Mrath's color had shifted to the deep purple of concern. "Your recommendation, Admiral?" "We approach with extreme caution. No standard absorption protocols. No demands. No shows of force. We treat them as equals from the start. Or," she paused, her crystalline form pulsing with shades of warning, "or we risk finding out exactly why they've been preparing for war since they split the atom." The council chamber remained silent for several long moments. Finally, Elder Mrath spoke, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of experience. In all my years, I've never heard of a pre-FTL species causing such concern in our military leadership. Perhaps, he glanced at the images of Earth's hidden preparations, perhaps this once, we should listen to such concerns. But even as the Council began drafting a more cautious first contact protocol, signals were already being detected from Earth's direction. The humans, it seemed, had noticed their observers, and their first message was not one of greeting or peace. It was a warning. To any and all observers beyond Sol's orbit, we see you. We've been watching you watch us. Consider this message carefully. We are not as primitive as you might think, and we are not as helpless as you might hope. Choose your next actions with extreme care. The message repeated in every major language of the Meridian Empire, proving that humans had already deciphered their communications. The council chamber erupted in chaos as the implications became clear. Humanity had not only been preparing for war, they'd been quietly studying their watchers all along. First contact was about to become far more interesting than anyone in the Meridian Empire had anticipated. The warning shot. The Meridian Empire's first contact vessel, the Harmonious Intent, dropped out of FTL at what they considered a respectful distance, just beyond Luna's orbit. Captain Selthor stood on the command deck, his bioluminescent patterns displaying confidence despite the Council's warnings. After all, this was still technically a pre-FTL civilization. Begin standard approach vector, he ordered. Activate translation arrays and prepare the welcome message. His crew, a mix of the Empire's most diplomatic species, moved with practiced efficiency. They'd done this hundreds of times before. The massive ship, nearly 3 kilometers in length, oriented itself toward Earth and began its stately approach. The first sign that this wouldn't be a standard first contact came immediately. Captain called out his sensor officer, her crystalline form flashing with alarm patterns, multiple objects approaching from the lunar surface. Speed and vector suggest intercept course. Zelthor's bioluminescence flickered with mild amusement. Primitive greeting vessels, no doubt. Maintain course but activate defensive screens as per protocol. Sir, the officer's crystals now pulsed red. These aren't ships. They're too small. And they're accelerating far beyond what chemical propulsion should allow. Before Zelthor could respond, dozens of small objects, each no larger than a human fighter jet, shot past the Harmonious Intent at speeds that made them barely visible to the naked eye. They moved with impossible precision, executing maneuvers that should have torn apart anything made with pre-FTL technology. Curious, Selthor mused, but hardly. The objects suddenly decelerated and formed a perfect sphere around his ship, each one orienting to face the Harmonious Intent. Small panels opened on their surfaces, revealing what looked like crude focusing arrays. Sir, his tactical officer's voice carried the harmonic overtones of genuine fear. Energy readings are impossible. They're linking together somehow. The combined power output is approaching capital ship levels. Zelthor's confidence finally cracked. Impossible. They can't have. Incoming transmission, announced his communications officer. Text and audio, in perfect Imperial standard. A human voice, calm and professional, filled the command deck. Meridian vessel Harmonious Intent. This is Luna Defense Command. You have entered restricted space without authorization. Your vessel's capabilities have been analyzed and logged. Please be advised that the devices currently surrounding you are Mark VI Cascade resonators. They are calibrated specifically to your shield frequencies, which we've been studying for quite some time. The human continued, This is not a threat, merely a demonstration. To prove our capability, one of the devices fired. A beam of pure white energy lanced out, intersecting with the ship's shields. For a fraction of a second, nothing seemed to happen. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, a perfect circular hole appeared in the Harmonious Intent's supposedly impenetrable defensive screen. As you can see, the human voice continued, still professionally detached. We are not entirely helpless. Your shields will regenerate in approximately 30 seconds. We recommend using that time to consider your next actions carefully. Zelthor's bridge crew stared in stunned silence. Humanity hadn't just developed energy weapons. They'd created one specifically designed to counter Imperial technology. The implications were staggering. Additionally, the human voice added, almost as an afterthought, "We should mention that these are our lunar defense systems. Our planetary defense grid is substantially more robust. We are, however, open to peaceful dialogue if conducted with mutual respect." Zelthor's artificial translator struggled to maintain composure as he responded, "We are here on a diplomatic mission. We mean no harm." "Excellent," the human replied. "Then you won't mind backing your ship to the outer marker. We're transmitting and waiting there while we verify your credentials with your council. We've already sent them a detailed report of this encounter, along with some suggestions for productive dialogue between our civilizations." As the harmonious intent carefully reversed course, surrounded by humanity's primitive defense platforms, Zelthor realized that the Council's warnings hadn't gone nearly far enough. These humans hadn't just been preparing for war. They'd been preparing specifically for this moment, studying their observers, learning their weaknesses, and developing countermeasures for technologies they shouldn't even have known existed. Back in the council chamber, Elder Mrath watched the report of the encounter in silence. Finally, he turned to Admiral Genvar. "How?" he asked simply. "How did they hide all of this?" The Admiral's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been respect. "They didn't hide it, Elder. They showed us exactly what they were. A species preparing for interstellar war. We just made the mistake of assuming they couldn't possibly be as advanced as they appeared to be preparing for. They knew we were watching. They knew we would underestimate them. And they used our own arrogance against us. And now, Genvar replied, we do what we should have done from the start. We treat them as equals, because I suspect we've only seen the beginning of what humanity is capable of." Meanwhile, in an underground facility deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Sarah Chen watched the encounter's recording with a small smile. "Phase 1 complete," she said to her staff. "They took the warning shot seriously. Now let's see if they're wise enough to take the hint, or if we need to show them why we've spent the last century preparing for this moment." The massive screens behind her displayed hundreds of other defense systems, each more advanced than the last, each designed specifically to counter Imperial technology. Humanity had been watching, learning, and building. They had turned their paranoia into preparation, their fears into strength, and they were just getting started. Unconventional warfare. The Grand Admiral of the Meridian Empire's combined fleet, Kexthor Van, stood before a holographic representation of Earth with barely contained rage. 3 days had passed since the harmonious intent incident, and the Empire's response was anything but harmonious. These upstart primitives dare to humiliate an Imperial vessel. His bioluminescent patterns flashed crimson with anger. "The Council's caution is making us look weak. It's time to show these humans their proper place in the galaxy." Despite the warnings from both Admiral Genvar and the preliminary diplomatic team, Kexthor had convinced enough council members that a show of force was necessary. The combined fleet hung in the darkness between Mars and Jupiter. 500 capital ships, each carrying enough firepower to level a continent. "Begin the demonstration," Kexthor commanded. "Target their lunar installations first." The fleet began its advance, a wall of gleaming metal stretching thousands of kilometers across space. But as they approached Mars' orbit, something unexpected happened. Every sensor screen in the fleet suddenly went dark. "Interference," Kexthor demanded. His technical officer's crystals pulsed with confusion. "No, sir. Something more sophisticated. It's as if space itself is being encrypted." Before anyone could process this impossibility, thousands of small objects emerged from hiding places throughout the asteroid belt. They weren't the same weapons platforms from the lunar defense grid. These were different, darker, more ominous. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting quantum entanglement signatures, massive ones. These devices, they're linked somehow, all of them, across the entire solar system." A voice echoed through every ship in the fleet, speaking perfect Imperial standard. "This is Earth Defense Command to the combined fleet. We've been expecting you. Welcome to Operation Dark Mirror." Suddenly, space itself seemed to fragment. Where there had been empty void between the fleet's ships, there were now thousands of overlapping spatial distortions. The fleet's carefully maintained formation became meaningless as each ship found itself apparently isolated in its own pocket of warped spacetime. "What you're experiencing," the human voice continued calmly, "is the result of Project Looking Glass. We've been studying your quantum communications technology for decades. Fascinating stuff. We found a way to turn it against itself, creating localized bubbles of quantum-encrypted space. Each of your ships is now effectively blind and alone." Kexthor watched in horror as his mighty fleet was divided and conquered without a single shot being fired. But the humans weren't finished. "Now, please observe Demonstration 2. Small drones, barely visible against the backdrop of space, approached several of the isolated ships. Instead of weapons, they carried what appeared to be simple mirrors. As the mirrors activated, targeted ships suddenly found themselves fighting their own reflections. Perfect quantum duplicates of their weapon signatures that turned their own firepower against them. "Quite elegant, isn't it?" the human voice commented. "Your own weapons, reflected back at you through quantum-entangled space. We call it the Hall of Mirrors defense. Purely defensive, of course. We're not actually firing at you. You're technically firing at yourselves." Kexthor watched helplessly as his fleet was systematically neutralized by technology that shouldn't have been possible. Ships that tried to fire their weapons found their own energy signatures turned back against them. Attempts to coordinate were blocked by the quantum encryption fields. The mighty combined fleet had been reduced to a collection of isolated, blind, and effectively weaponless vessels. In her command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, General Chen watched the operation unfold with grim satisfaction. "Send the final message," she ordered. The human voice returned to the fleet's commanders. "You have two options. Retreat beyond the Kuiper Belt, or stay and witness Demonstration 3. Be advised that demonstrations get progressively less gentle. You have 10 minutes to decide." In the council chamber, Elder Mrath watched the feed with a mixture of horror and fascination. They weren't building weapons, he realized aloud. They were building counters, specific counters to our specific technologies. They've turned our own advantages into vulnerabilities. Admiral Genvar's crystalline form pulsed with what might have been admiration. They studied us for decades while we dismissed them as primitives. Every technology we used to observe them, they learned to subvert. Every advantage we thought we had, they prepared to neutralize. This isn't just technological achievement, it's strategic brilliance. The combined fleet, pride of the Meridian Empire, began a humiliating retreat. But as they withdrew, their sensors captured something even more disturbing: massive structures uncloaking themselves throughout the solar system. Installations that dwarfed anything the Empire had built, hidden in plain sight through technology the humans shouldn't have had for centuries. "A final message from Earth Defense Command," the human voice announced as the fleet retreated. "What you've witnessed today represents less than 10% of our defensive capabilities. The next time you approach our system uninvited, you'll see what we can do when we're actually trying to be hostile." As the fleet limped away, Kexthor received a private transmission from Earth. It contained a single image, a photograph from human history, showing a small mammal standing defiantly against a massive battle tank. Below it was a simple message: "Size isn't everything. Neither is age. You assumed we would be primitive because we're young. You assumed we would be weak because we're small. But here's the thing about humans. We've spent our entire history learning to punch above our weight. Welcome to the galaxy's weight class, Admiral. Better luck next time." Back on Earth, General Chen turned to her staff. Begin Phase 3 preparations. They'll be back, and next time they won't underestimate us. Make sure they have reason to regret that too. The quantum mirrors throughout the solar system continued their silent vigil, ready to turn any aggression back upon itself. Humanity had revealed some of its cards, but anyone paying attention would realize the terrifying truth. They were still smiling. And no one smiles during a card game unless they're holding something better in reserve. The turning point. In the deepest levels of the Meridian Empire's central archives, Elder Mrath and Admiral Genvar stood before a holographic display showing Earth's historical records, records the humans had freely provided after the combined fleet's retreat. We've been blind. Mrath's tentacles waved in agitation, not just to their technological capabilities, but to something far more fundamental. The display showed scenes from human history, countless wars, endless conflicts, but also incredible moments of unity and technological leaps made under pressure. Each major advancement in human history had come not during peace, but in response to threats, real or perceived. Their entire civilization, Genvar observed, her crystalline form pulsing thoughtfully, is built on overcoming existential threats. They don't just adapt, they transform. And we, her colors shifted to embarrassment. We became exactly the threat they'd been preparing for. A new presence entered the archive chamber, a human woman in a formal diplomatic uniform. Dr. Emily Chung, Earth's first ambassador to the Empire, walked confidently toward them. "I see you've been studying our history," she said, gesturing to the displays. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Mrath turned all four eye stalks toward her. Why? Why such extensive preparation? Such paranoia? Chang smiled, but there was steel behind it. Paranoia? No, pattern recognition. Throughout our history, whenever two civilizations with vastly different technological levels met, the less advanced one usually suffered. We decided very early that when we finally met alien life, we wouldn't be the less advanced civilization, no matter how long it took or what it cost. She waved her hand, and the holographic display shifted to show massive underground cities, orbital shipyards hidden behind cloaking fields that the Empire's best sensors still couldn't penetrate, and facilities that seemed to defy known physics. Operation Dark Mirror was just the surface, she continued. A test of our most basic defensive systems. Would you like to know what we were really building all those years you watched us? Without waiting for a response, she activated a small device on her wrist. Suddenly, the entire Sol system lit up on the display. What had appeared to be normal asteroid fields transformed, revealing themselves as vast networks of interconnected quantum processors. Seemingly empty regions of space showed massive energy signatures. We turned our entire solar system into a computer, Chang explained. Every asteroid, every chunk of space debris, all linked through quantum entanglement. While you watched our visible technology, we were building something far more ambitious. We call it the solar consciousness. Mrath's tentacles went still, a sign of shock in his species. You created a system-wide artificial intelligence. Chang shook her head. No, we created a system-wide human intelligence. Every human mind can link to it, becoming part of a vast network that can process information and react at quantum speeds. Those defensive platforms that confused you. They weren't automated. They were extensions of human consciousness, operated by linked pilots experiencing time at a different rate than you. Genvar's crystalline form flashed with sudden understanding. The quantum encryption fields, they weren't just for defense. They were processing nodes, Chang confirmed. When we said space itself was encrypted, we meant it literally. We've turned the fabric of space-time in our system into a computational medium. Your fleet wasn't just blind. It was operating inside our neural network. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Every human child born now has the option to link to the solar consciousness when they mature. We've effectively made our entire species into a distributed quantum superorganism while maintaining our individual identities. Evolution on our terms. Why tell us this? Mrath asked, his voice carrying harmonics of both fear and awe. Chang's expression softened slightly. Because we don't want war, Elder Mrath. We never did. Everything we built, the defenses, the solar consciousness, all of it, was created in the hope that when this day came, we would be strong enough to have a choice, strong enough to establish peace through respect rather than submission. She turned to face them fully. We're revealing this now as a gesture of trust, and as a warning. The Empire has two paths forward. Accept us as equals and allies, learning to coexist with a civilization that chose to evolve differently than yours. Or, Genvar prompted. Or discover what else we built while you thought you were merely observing primitive humans playing with rockets. As if to emphasize her point, a new alert flashed across the archive's displays. The quantum signature of the solar consciousness had been detected far beyond Sol's boundary, impossible given known physics. Ah yes, Chang smiled. I should mention, we figured out faster than light travel decades ago. We just didn't use it where you could see. Those colonies you detected on Mars and the Moon. Decoys. Our real colonies are elsewhere. Insurance, you might say, in case first contact went poorly. Mrath and Genvar exchanged glances. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just prepared for first contact. They had fundamentally transformed themselves into something unprecedented in galactic history, all while maintaining the appearance of a nascent spacefaring race. The Council must know of this, Mrath said finally. They already do, Chang replied. This conversation is being conducted simultaneously with 17 other diplomatic teams throughout your empire. One of the advantages of quantum-linked consciousness, we're very good at multitasking. As they left the archive chamber, Chang turned back one last time. Oh, and Admiral, those defense platforms your fleet encountered, they're already obsolete. We replaced them the moment you saw them. Like I said, pattern recognition. We learned from you while you thought you were studying us. That's the thing about humans. We never stop evolving, never stop adapting. The only question is whether the Empire wants to evolve with us. The future of galactic civilization now hung on the Empire's response to a species that had turned their greatest fear into their greatest strength, and their isolation into an opportunity to become something entirely new. Imperial retreat. The Grand Council chamber of the Meridian Empire had never been so full. Representatives from every member species crowded the tiered seats, their varied forms creating a living tapestry of galactic diversity. At the center of it all stood three figures, Elder Mrath, Admiral Genvar, and Dr. Emily Chang. The massive quantum display behind them showed something that had shaken the Empire to its core. A complete map of known space, but with additions that shouldn't have existed. Hundreds of points of light marked human quantum signatures, spread throughout the galaxy in places the Empire had thought empty. As you can see, Chang addressed the Council, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. Humanity's presence extends far beyond Sol. Those colonies we mentioned, they're not just outposts. They're nodes in our quantum network, expanding the reach of the solar consciousness across the galaxy. A ripple of concerned murmurs spread through the chamber. Elder Mrath raised a tentacle for silence. You've hidden entire civilizations from us, he stated. Why reveal this now? Chang's smile carried a hint of sadness. Because we've detected something you haven't yet, something that makes our little diplomatic tension seem rather insignificant. The display shifted, showing the edge of the galaxy. Strange energy patterns pulsed in the void between stars, patterns that made even the most seasoned council members feel uneasy. We call them the Void Dancers, Chang continued. They're not like us, or you. They don't think in terms of matter and energy as we understand them. They exist in the spaces between spaces, and they're spreading. We've been watching them for 30 years, ever since our quantum network first detected their presence. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Admiral Genvar's crystalline form pulsed with realization. This is why. All of it. The defensive preparations, the quantum consciousness, the hidden colonies. You weren't just preparing for first contact with us. No, Chang confirmed. We were preparing for them. Everything we built. The solar consciousness, the quantum network, even our seemingly aggressive defensive posture. It was all designed with the void dancers in mind. We needed to evolve beyond traditional physical limitations, beyond normal space-time constraints. We needed to become something new. She gestured, and the display showed something even more extraordinary. The full extent of humanity's quantum network, forming a vast web throughout the galaxy. We're not just a defense network. We're building a galactic immune system. Each colony, each quantum node, is designed to detect and respond to extra-dimensional incursions. The technology we used against your fleet, it was a test run for containing and redirecting void dancer manifestations. Elder Mrath's tentacles waved in complex patterns of shock and wonder. You're proposing an alliance, Chang finished, not based on military power or technological superiority, but on survival. The void dancers don't care about our political differences or our past conflicts. They're a threat to all conventional life in this galaxy. We've spent a century preparing not just to defend humanity, but to defend all life. The display shifted again, showing the intricate quantum pathways that connected human colonies. We can extend the solar consciousness network to include empire worlds, not to control or monitor, but to protect. To create a unified defense system that transcends individual species. We've already established quantum resonance chambers on 43 of your border worlds, with their government's cooperation, of course. The council members looked at each other in shock. Chang continued, those diplomats who seemed so cooperative after the fleet incident. They understood what we showed them. Sometimes the best way to overcome fear is to confront a greater one together. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the chamber. The display showed a massive distortion at the edge of Empire space, a void dancer manifestation larger than any humanity had detected before. Perfect timing, Chang said, seemingly unfazed. Would you like to see what humanity has really been building? She closed her eyes for a moment, linking to the solar consciousness. Across the galaxy, thousands of quantum nodes activated simultaneously. The human network lit up like a neural web, and waves of structured quantum energy began to flow through space itself. The council watched in awe as the void dancer manifestation was contained, transformed, and finally redirected back into its own dimension, all without a single shot being fired or ship being launched. That, Chang said quietly, is what we can do alone. Imagine what we could achieve together. Elder Mrath turned all 4 eye stalks to the council. We were wrong, he announced. Wrong about humanity, wrong about our place in the galaxy, wrong about the nature of power itself. They didn't build weapons. They built shields. They didn't prepare for war. They prepared to protect life itself. He turned to Chang. The Empire accepts your offer of alliance, Dr. Chang. Not as equals, but as students. You've shown us a path we never imagined existed. Chang shook her head. Not students. Partners. The void dancers are just the beginning. There are other things stirring in the dark between galaxies. We'll need every perspective, every species' unique insights, to face what's coming. Humanity didn't make itself stronger to dominate. We did it to protect, to preserve, to ensure that life itself, in all its wonderful diversity, continues. As the council session ended, Admiral Genvar approached Chang privately. You could have conquered us, she said. When we sent the fleet, when we threatened you, you could have ended it all. That was never the point, Chang replied. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology, or even the solar consciousness. It's our ability to imagine better futures and work toward them, no matter how impossible they seem. We didn't spend a century preparing for war, Admiral. We spent it preparing to make war obsolete. Above them, the quantum network continued to pulse, a living web of connected consciousness spanning the galaxy. Humanity had transformed itself not to rule, but to protect. They had taken their greatest fears, of invasion, of extinction, of cosmic horror, and turned them into the foundation of something greater, a shield for all life, built by the species that had spent its entire history learning to face its fears and emerge stronger. The age of isolation was over. The age of unity had begun, and somewhere in the void between stars, ancient beings that fed on division and fear felt something they had never experienced before: doubt. Humanity had changed the rules of the game, and they were just getting started.